At first I thought it was some building notice. The warehouse had been turned into apartments years before, but it still had the kind of problems old buildings like to keep. Heat that worked too well on one side and not at all on the other. Pipes that sounded like somebody dragging a chair across concrete. Elevator doors that opened like they were tired of being asked. So I bent down with my work bag still on my shoulder, picked up the note, and almost missed the key sitting beside it. My spare key. The one I kept on a plain silver ring. The one I was sure had been in my coat pocket that morning. I unfolded the paper. "You dropped your keys." That was all it said. No name, no extra line, no little smiley face. Just 4 words in neat handwriting. But I knew who wrote it. Laurel from Unit 8. My next-door neighbor. The nurse. The woman I had spent 7 months politely avoiding like she had done something wrong, when the truth was she had not done one single thing wrong. I stood in the hallway longer than made sense, holding that note and staring at my key. The lights above me buzzed faintly. Somewhere downstairs, the front door shut and the sound rolled through the old brick walls. I should have just unlocked my door and gone inside. I was tired, my neck hurt from leaning over drawings all day, and I still had revisions waiting on my kitchen table. But I could not move right away, because Laurel had found my key, picked it up, brought it to my door, and left it there without making it a thing. That was exactly like her, from what little I had allowed myself to know. And that was the problem. I moved into that building 2 years after the end of the relationship I thought was going to become my life. It ended at a kitchen table, which somehow made it worse. No big scene. No shouting in the rain. No slammed doors. Just her sitting across from me with both hands wrapped around a mug, telling me calmly that she did not see us the same way anymore. I remember looking at the plant behind her shoulder because I could not look at her face. I remember the dishwasher running. I remember how normal the room looked while everything in me went quiet. After that, I got careful. Careful with plans. Careful with people. Careful with anything that made me want too much. I was 34, an architect, and I spent my days designing homes for other people. Kitchens where families would stand half asleep making coffee. Bedrooms with morning light. Courtyards where neighbors might become friends. I knew how to shape space so people could live inside it. Then I went home to my own apartment and kept it as empty as I could without it looking sad. The warehouse building helped. It was all concrete floors, high ceilings, exposed beams, and big windows that made everything look cleaner than it was. My apartment was quiet. That was what I wanted. Quiet felt safe. Then, the first week I lived there, I saw Laurel. It was early, maybe a little after 7. I had stepped into the hall with coffee in one hand and my laptop bag in the other. Her door opened before I reached the elevator. She came out in navy scrubs, then stopped like she had forgotten why she opened the door. Her hair was pulled back, but half of it had slipped loose. She had one hand on the door frame and the other pressed against her forehead. She looked like she had just finished holding herself together for 12 straight hours and needed 10 seconds before doing anything else. I said, "Morning." She looked up, not fast, not startled, just tired. Then she gave me this small smile. Not bright, not practiced, just real enough that it hit me in the chest before I had a chance to prepare for it. "Morning," she said. That was it. One word. I got into the elevator and stared at the buttons like they had suddenly become very complicated. By the time I reached the lobby, I had already decided I needed to stay away from her. That sounds ridiculous now. Probably was ridiculous then. But at the time it felt reasonable. I had spent 2 years turning my life into something steady. Work. Gym when I remembered. Groceries on Sundays. Calls from my brother I sometimes answered. No surprises. No Hope showing up in the hallway wearing scrubs and looking at me like she knew exactly what tired felt like. So I kept my distance. Not in a rude way. That would have been easier to explain. I nodded when I saw her, held the door if she was behind me, said thanks if she moved aside at the mailboxes. Normal neighbor things, safe things. But I learned her schedule anyway. That was the part one did not like admitting. I knew she left before sunrise some mornings because her door clicked shut at 5:18, almost exactly. I knew she came home late on Wednesdays because her keys tapped against the metal frame before she unlocked her door. I knew she played quiet music some nights, never loud enough to bother me, just enough that a low melody slipped through the wall while I sat over building plans. Fridays, she ordered food from the same Thai place. I knew because the delivery guy always got lost and knocked on my door first. "She's next door," I would say, and every time, I would hear Laurel open her door and say, "Sorry about that." Like she had personally designed the hallway numbers badly. In the winter, she ran in the mornings. I saw her twice through the lobby windows, pulling on gloves, bouncing once on her toes before stepping into the cold like she had made a deal with herself and hated the terms. I noticed all of it. Then I acted like I noticed nothing. If I heard her door open, I waited inside mine until her footsteps moved away. If I saw her at the elevator, I checked my phone even if the screen was blank. If she stood at the mailboxes, I suddenly remembered something in my car or upstairs or anywhere else. 7 months of that. 7 months of pretending she was just the woman in Unit 8. Then I dropped my key, and she picked it up. I finally unlocked my door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark except for the desk lamp I had forgotten to turn off that morning. Rolled drawings covered half the table. A model for a community center sat near the window, all clean lines and tiny white walls, waiting for people who did not exist yet. I put the key on the table. Then I put the note beside it. For a while, I just stood there in my coat. The kind thing would have been to knock on her door and thank her. A normal person would have done that. A man who had not been acting strange for 7 months would have crossed the hall, tapped twice, smiled, and said, "Hey, I think you saved me from a very bad night." Instead, I stood in my apartment, 12 inches of wall away from her, and listened. Nothing. No music. No footsteps. No sink running. She was probably sleeping. Or maybe she was sitting on her couch with her feet tucked under her, eating late because her shift had bent the whole day out of shape. I did not know. I had made sure I did not know. And somehow that little note made the whole arrangement feel stupid. Not dramatic. Not tragic. Just stupid. I had built a life around distance and called it peace. I had been proud of how controlled I was. How little I needed. How clean the lines were. Then Laurel from Unit 8 found my spare key and returned it with 4 words. And suddenly I could see the truth sitting right there on my table. I had not been avoiding a neighbor. I had been avoiding the first person in 2 years who made me want to open the door. The next morning, I tried to leave before she did. That was my whole plan. Not a smart plan, not a brave one. Just a plan. Get out early, avoid the hallway, send a thank you note later, and pretend I had handled it like an adult. I was already halfway to the elevator when I realized I had forgotten my portfolio. I stopped so suddenly the elevator sensor clicked and the doors opened without me. "Of course," I muttered. My portfolio was on the kitchen table under the same lamp as the note and the key. I had a client meeting at 9, and walking into it without drawings would have made me look like a man who had lost control of his own morning, which was exactly what I was. So I turned around. That was when Laurel's door opened. I heard it before I saw her. A soft scrape, then the small sound of something hitting the floor. Papers slid across the concrete hallway. Laurel was crouched outside Unit 8 in gray sweatpants and a hospital sweatshirt, trying to gather loose pages that had spilled from her tote bag. Her hair was damp, like she had showered in a hurry. She looked tired, but not the same kind of tired as that first morning. This was more annoyed tired. The kind that came with dropping everything before coffee. For half a second, I almost kept walking. That is embarrassing to admit, but it is true. Then one of her papers slid near my shoe. I bent down and picked it up. She looked up at me. "Morning," she said. There it was again. Same word. Same woman. Different problem. "Morning," I said. "You lost a few." "Yeah." I like to start the day by throwing my personal life into the hallway. I glanced at the page in my hand. It looked like a continuing education form, so I quickly turned it toward her without reading. "I think this one escaped the farthest." "Thanks." I crouched and helped her gather the rest. Neither of us made it dramatic. No hands touching by accident, no music swelling through the pipes. Just two people on a cold hallway floor, reaching under the edge of the radiator for a wrinkled schedule. Still, it felt like something had shifted. When we stood, she hugged the papers to her chest and looked at me for a second longer than usual. "You're Caleb, right?" I almost laughed because of course she knew. Our names were printed beside the mailboxes downstairs in little metal slots. But hearing her say mine made me feel caught. "Yeah, Caleb Morgan. Laurel Hayes." She adjusted the strap of her tote. "Even though you probably already knew that." I did. "From the mailbox?" "From the mailbox," I said. She nodded toward my door. "And from the fact that you live close enough for me to hear when your printer decides to fight back." I looked at her, surprised. She smiled a little. "It has a very specific sound. That printer is a problem." I figured. Either that or you have a small angry machine trapped in there. That got me. I smiled before I could stop myself. Then I remembered the note. "Thank you," I said, "for the key. Last night." Her expression softened, but not too much. Laurel did not seem like someone who enjoyed making simple things heavy. "No problem. I found it near the mailboxes. I figured leaving it there would be a bad idea." "Yeah, very bad. You looked pretty done when you came in yesterday. I thought knocking might scare you." "It probably would have." She laughed once, quiet and quick. There was a pause after that. Not a bad one, just new. I should have said something else. Maybe asked how her shift was or offered to get her coffee. Instead, I held up my empty hand like a man who had forgotten how normal gestures worked. "I forgot my portfolio." She glanced at my apartment. "Architect." That caught me off guard. "Yeah. I've seen the blueprints through your window when I'm coming back from runs. Not in a creepy way. Right? I mean, your blinds are usually open. I didn't think you noticed." She gave me a look that was almost amused. "Caleb, your windows are huge and you tape building plans to the glass." "Fair." "And you're a nurse," I said, because apparently we were trading facts we both already knew. "Also through the window?" "Scrubs," I said. "And the hours." "Ah, the haunted hours." "Exactly." She shifted her tote higher on her shoulder. "Well, good luck with the portfolio. Good luck with the escaping papers." She walked toward the elevator, and I went back into my apartment, but I stood there for a second with my hand on the door. That was the first real conversation we ever had. It lasted maybe 2 minutes. For the rest of the day, I remembered every word like an idiot. After that, the hallway changed. Not all at once. Nothing about Laurel happened all at once. It was smaller than that. A few days later, I saw her at the mailboxes, trying to open hers while balancing a coffee, 2 envelopes, and a bag from the pharmacy. Before, I would have slowed down, pretended to check a message, then come back later. This time I stepped beside her and opened mine. "Your delivery guy knocked on my door again Friday," I said. She shut her mailbox with her elbow. "The Thai food guy?" "He looked disappointed when I wasn't you. He's invested in my spring rolls." I could tell. She looked into her coffee like it might explain her life. In my defense, they're good spring rolls. The next week, the elevator stalled between floors for 8 seconds, which was apparently enough for Laurel to say, "This building is one bad mood away from becoming a documentary." I said, "As the architect in the elevator, I feel attacked." "You designed this?" "No." "Then you're safe." That became the kind of thing we did. Small comments, quick jokes, little openings that did not ask too much. In the lobby, she told me the front door stuck because people pulled instead of lifting. By the mailboxes, I told her the heat in my apartment turned tropical after midnight. Outside the elevator, she said Unit 6 played guitar like he was trying to apologize to the instrument. I started looking for her without admitting I was looking. And Laurel, to my surprise, looked back. One night, about 3 weeks after the note, someone knocked on my door. I opened it and found her standing there in leggings, thick socks, and an oversized cardigan, holding a plastic container in both hands. "I made too much soup," she said. I looked at the container. How much is too much? Enough that I started feeling judged by it. That sounds serious. It was getting personal. I stepped aside. Come in. She hesitated for just one beat. So quick another person might have missed it. But I saw it because I knew hesitation. I had been living inside it for years. Then she came in. My apartment was warmer than it should have been, because the radiator had once again decided winter was a personal challenge. Laurel looked around, not nosy, just observant. She noticed the model near the window, the rolls of tracing paper, the stack of books by the couch. You really are an architect, she said. I've been running a very long con. She set the soup on the counter. What's that one? I followed her eyes to the model. Community clinic. East Side. A clinic. She stepped closer, hands in her cardigan pockets. That waiting room is too exposed. I blinked. What? She pointed at the tiny white shape inside the model. People waiting for appointments don't always want to feel watched, especially if they're nervous. You need a corner that feels private without actually hiding them. I stared at her. She looked back. What? No, you're right. I know. I laughed. Confident. I spend half my life in medical buildings designed by people who clearly never sat in them while scared, tired, or trying not to cry in public. She said it casually, but it landed. I looked at the model again, then at her. That's actually useful. Good. Payment for soup. We ate standing at first, then sitting on opposite ends of the couch with bowls balanced in our hands. She told me about the worst vending machine in the hospital. I told her about a client who wanted a home office that looked humble but expensive. Laurel laughed harder than I expected at that. She was funny in a dry, quick way, sharp but not mean. She noticed everything, then delivered it like she had been waiting for the right moment to set it down. But I also started to see the pattern. If I asked about work in a general way, she answered. If I asked if she had always wanted to be a nurse, she gave me a short version and changed the subject. If the conversation got too quiet, too close, too easy, she stood up or checked the time or made a joke with a wall behind it. I recognized the move because I used it too. A few nights later, when my apartment got too hot to stand, I climbed out onto the fire escape with a glass of water. Laurel was already there, sitting on the metal platform outside her window in a coat, her knees pulled up. For a second, we just looked at each other through the cold. Shared balcony? She said. Illegal shared balcony, probably. Then don't tell the architect. I hear he's unreliable. She smiled and looked out over the street. I sat down with enough space between us to make it easy for her to leave if she wanted. Below us, tires hissed on wet pavement. The city looked tired and awake at the same time. After a minute, she said, Your apartment too hot? Like a greenhouse. Mine's freezing. Of course it is. This building has no middle setting. It's either desert or meat locker. I laughed, and she smiled again, but then the silence stretched. This time she did not rush to fill it. Neither did I. That was when I understood something simple and inconvenient. I liked talking to Laurel, but I also liked sitting beside her when nobody said anything. That felt more dangerous than the talking, because talking could still be explained. Silence had weight. She turned her head slightly. You always this quiet? Mostly. By choice? I looked down at my glass of water. These days, yeah. She nodded like that answer made sense to her, maybe more than I wanted it to. Then her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out, looked at the screen, and for half a second her face changed. Not much, just enough. The smile left first, then the rest of her followed. She turned the phone face down on the metal between us. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, she said too quickly. Just work. I knew it was not work. I also knew better than to say that, so I let it go. A minute later, she stood and brushed her hands on her coat. I should try to sleep. Yeah, me too. She climbed back through her window, then paused with one hand on the frame. Caleb? Yeah. Thanks for not asking twice. Then she disappeared inside. I sat out there for a while after she was gone, cold working through my shirt, water untouched in my hand. The old version of me would have called that a warning and backed away. But by then I had already opened the door. The stairwell was the first place I understood Laurel was carrying more than a hard schedule. It was a Tuesday night, late enough that the building had gone quiet but not late enough for me to pretend I was sleeping. I had been staring at the same line on a drawing for 20 minutes, moving a wall 6 inches one way, then 6 inches back like that counted as work. Then I heard the stairwell door open. Not slam, just open. A minute passed. It did not close. I do not know why I got up. Maybe because her apartment was next to mine and I had started noticing the sounds that were not normal. Maybe because I had heard her come home earlier and she had not turned on music. Maybe because once you start caring about someone, your body starts checking on them before your mind approves it. I stepped into the hallway. The door to the stairs was cracked open, and cold air moved through it. I pushed it gently and looked down. Laurel was sitting on the landing between the 8th and 7th floors. She still had her work shoes on. Her coat was open, her bag beside her, and her elbows rested on her knees. She was not crying. That might have been easier to understand. She was just staring at the wall across from her like she had reached the edge of herself and needed to stop before going one more step. I should have asked if she was okay. I did not. I walked down 6 steps and sat across from her on the other side of the landing, back against the railing. She looked at me once, then looked away. Neither of us said anything. The stairwell smelled like dust and cold metal. Somewhere far below, a door opened and shut. A pipe ticked behind the wall. Laurel rubbed one thumb slowly over the knuckle of her other hand. 10 minutes passed like that. Maybe more. Finally she said, "You're good at this. At sitting on stairs? At not making people explain." I looked at the chipped paint near my shoe. "I've needed that before." She nodded. That was all she gave me that night. After a while, she stood, picked up her bag and said, "I'm going in." "Okay." She paused beside me. "Thank you." Then she went upstairs, and I waited until I heard her apartment door close before I moved. After that, something between us got quieter, but not colder. 2 nights later, she came to my door after a late shift. No soup this time. No excuse. She just knocked, and when I opened, she was standing there in black leggings, a hospital hoodie, and that look she got when she was trying to decide whether she had made a mistake by showing up. "I can leave," she said. "You just got here." "That's not an answer." I stepped aside. "Come in." She did. I did not ask if she wanted tea. I had already put the kettle on when I heard her door. That was probably too much, but she did not call me out on it. She just watched me take down the mug she always used, the blue one with a crack in the handle that did not go all the way through. "You know what I drink now," she said. "Peppermint when you're trying to sleep. Black tea when you're lying to yourself about being fine." She leaned against the counter. "That is annoyingly accurate. I'm an architect. We notice patterns and then pretend it's a skill." She smiled, but it faded when she looked at the table. My blueprints were spread out under the lamp. A row house renovation, old foundation, new interior. I was trying to preserve the outside and change everything inside without making the place collapse. Laurel walked over and studied the drawing like it mattered. "Can I ask you something strange?" she said. "Probably. Have you ever designed something around something that wasn't there anymore?" I looked at her. "All the time." "No, I mean..." She touched the edge of the paper, not quite pointing. "Like a space where something used to be, and even after it's gone, everything still has to bend around it." I knew by then not to rush her, so I said, "Yeah, more than people think." She sat down slowly. I put the tea in front of her and took the chair across from her, not too close. "I was engaged," she said. I kept my hands around my own mug and said nothing. "His name was Patrick. We were together almost 4 years. He was the kind of person everyone liked immediately. Nurses liked him. Doctors liked him. My mother liked him, which was almost impossible." She gave a small laugh with no humor in it. "He knew how to be exactly what a room wanted." I watched her thumb rub the side of the mug. "He had another life," she said. "Not one mistake. Not one bad night. A whole other version of himself running next to the one I knew. Other promises. Other plans. Other people who believed him too. The apartment felt very still. When I found out, people kept saying I couldn't have known. They meant well. But that was the worst part. She looked at me then. I'm trained to notice things, Caleb. I notice when someone's breathing changes before they say they feel strange. I notice when a patient says they're fine and their hand is gripping the blanket too tight. I notice tiny changes all day long. Her voice stayed steady, which somehow made it harder. And I missed the biggest lie in my own life. I wanted to say the normal things. That it was not her fault. That he had fooled her on purpose. That trusting someone did not make her foolish. All of that was true, but none of it felt useful sitting there between us. So I said, "That's a heavy thing to carry into a new place." She looked down at her tea. For a few seconds I thought I had said the wrong thing. Then she breathed out and nodded. "Yeah." She stayed until nearly midnight. We did not talk about Patrick the whole time. Actually, after that, we mostly talked about the row house. She asked why I kept the front wall, and I explained the history of the block. She said people needed to feel like their home remembered them, even if they changed everything inside. I wrote that down after she left. Not because it was poetic. Because she was right. The weeks after that felt warmer. Not simple exactly, but easier. Laurel started coming over without pretending she had accidentally cooked too much. I bought the tea she liked and kept it in the cabinet. She would sit at my kitchen table after work, shoes kicked off under the chair, looking through my plans with tired eyes and sharp comments. "That hallway feels mean," she said once. "A hallway can't be mean. That one can." Another night she fell asleep on my couch during a documentary she had chosen and insisted was interesting. I covered her with a blanket and sat at the table working, trying not to look at her too often. When she woke up, she blinked at me like she had forgotten where she was, then smiled in a way that made me have to look down at my drawing. We still did not name it. Maybe both of us were afraid that naming it would make it fragile. Then Garrett showed up. I was coming back from the hardware store on a Saturday afternoon, carrying a bag of screws and a replacement hinge, when I saw Laurel in the lobby. She was standing near the mailboxes with a man I did not know. He was tall, clean jacket, easy smile. The kind of man who took up space without looking like he meant to. His body was angled toward her like the conversation was private. But his voice carried enough for me to hear. "I just wanted to see you," he said. "You weren't answering." Laurel's face was different. Not scared. Not angry. Locked down. "Garrett, you shouldn't be here." He smiled like she had made a joke. "Come on. We worked together for years. I can't check on you?" "That's not what this is." I slowed near the elevator, not wanting to interrupt, not wanting to leave either. Garrett glanced at me, then back at her. "Is this why you've been ignoring everyone?" Laurel's eyes flicked toward me for half a second. That was all. But Garrett saw it. His smile changed. I stepped closer. "Everything okay?" Laurel answered before he could. "Yes." Garrett looked me over. "Neighbor. Next door," I said. He nodded like he was filing me away. "Nice." Laurel's voice sharpened. "I'll talk to you later." "You keep saying that." "Then listen the first time." For a moment nobody moved. Then Garrett lifted both hands, still smiling. "Fine. I'm going." He walked out through the front door, but he looked back once through the glass. Laurel stood still until he was gone. I wanted to ask who he was. I wanted to ask why her hands had closed into fists at her sides. I wanted to ask why he acted like he had a right to stand in her building and make her smaller. Instead I said, "Do you want me to walk up with you?" She shook her head. "No. I'm fine." There it was. Fine. The word people used when they needed the conversation to end. For the next few days, Laurel disappeared behind her door. I heard her come and go. I heard her phone buzz through the wall more than once. Then stop. No music. No knock. No tired voice at my table telling me my hallway was mean. On the second night, I walked to her door and stood there with my hand raised. I did not knock, because I knew what it felt like when someone tried to pull you out before you were ready. Even if they meant well, it could feel like another demand. So I went back inside. On the third night, I left a box of tea outside her door with a note that said, "No need to answer." 10 minutes later, I heard her door open, then close. She did not knock. That hurt more than I expected, but I let it be. By the fourth night, I understood Garrett was not the real threat. He was pressure, a reminder, a voice from a life where Laurel had learned not to trust what felt safe. And I was on the other side of the wall, wanting to be chosen, trying hard not to turn that wanting into another thing she had to manage. So I stayed close enough to be found. And I waited. On the fourth night, Laurel knocked on my door at 12:17. I know the exact time because I had been staring at the clock on my oven like it owed me an answer. I had not been working. I had plans open on the table, sure, but the pencil in my hand had not moved in 20 minutes. Every sound from the hallway made me look up. Every silence felt longer than it should have. Then came the knock. 2 soft taps. Not confident, not casual, but there. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. When I opened the door, Laurel was standing in the hall in a sweatshirt and bare feet, like she had crossed over before she could talk herself out of it. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her face looked tired but clear, not blank like in the stairwell, not locked down like in the lobby with Garrett, just scared. "Hi," she said. "Hi. I almost didn't knock." "I'm glad you did." She looked past me into the apartment, then back at me. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked in, stopped near the kitchen table, and pressed her hands into the sleeves of her sweatshirt. I closed the door but did not move too close. The whole room felt like it was waiting with us. "I almost called Garrett back," she said. I did not answer right away. She looked at me quickly. "Not because I want him. I need you to know that." "Okay. It's just..." She let out a breath and looked toward the window. "Fear is stupid. It makes the old bad thing feel easier than the new good thing." I understood that so clearly it almost hurt. She kept going before I could say anything. Garrett was around after Patrick. He wasn't the same, but he knew that version of me. The messy version. The one who didn't trust herself. And when he showed up downstairs, it was like he brought that whole time with him. She rubbed one hand over her forehead. I hated that he could still make me feel 16 steps behind myself. I hated that part of me wanted to answer just because it was familiar. Not because it was right. Just familiar. I leaned back against the counter. "Did you call him?" "No." "Did you want to?" She swallowed. For about 10 terrible minutes. That answer was more honest than the easy one would have been. Then she looked at me straight on. "Why did you ignore me for 7 months?" There it was. The question had been living between us so long it almost felt like furniture. I had walked around it, joked around it, acted like the answer was smaller than it was. But Laurel did not look like she would accept a half-truth, and I was tired of hiding behind one. So I told her. "The first morning I saw you, you were standing outside your door in scrubs," I said. "You looked like you had made it home by willpower alone." Her mouth shifted slightly, like she remembered. "You smiled at me," I said. "Just a tired smile. Nothing big. But I felt it. I felt something real before I knew anything about you." She stayed still. "And I didn't want to feel that," I said. I had spent 2 years making my life small enough to control. After my last relationship ended, I didn't trust anything that made me want more. I thought if I kept things quiet, I'd be fine. "Were you?" "No." I laughed once, barely. "I was just quiet." Laurel's eyes softened, but she did not rescue me from the rest of it. "So I avoided you," I said. "Not because you did anything. Because you didn't. Because you were just there, and I knew you could pull me out of the life I had built, and I wasn't sure there would be anything under me if that happened." She looked down for a second. "When did it stop working?" "The key note." She blinked. I pointed toward the table, even though the note was long gone into a drawer by then. "For words. You dropped your keys. That was all it took." A laugh slipped out of her, soft and surprised. "That mattered that much?" "Apparently." I didn't even know if you'd know it was me. I knew. How? I shrugged. It felt like you. That made her quiet. She came a little closer, then stopped at the edge of the table. I've been scared of being wrong again, she said. That's the real thing. Not Garrett. Not Patrick, even. Me. I don't trust my own read on people anymore. I said nothing because this was not something to interrupt. But I've been watching you too, she said. Not in a strange way. I raised an eyebrow. She almost smiled. Okay. Maybe a little strange. But you live 12 inches away. I notice things. Like my printer? Especially your printer. Her smile faded into something warmer. I notice that you do what you say. I notice that you don't push when you could. I notice that you left tea outside my door and didn't make me thank you for it. I noticed that you sat with me in the stairwell and didn't ask me to perform being okay. My throat tightened, and I hated how visible it probably was. Laurel stepped closer. I kept waiting for the version of you that proved I was wrong, she said. The speech, the pressure, the little turn where steady becomes control. But you stayed, Caleb. I looked at her. That sounds boring. It's not. She was close enough now that I could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the small crease in her sweatshirt sleeve where she had been gripping it. She lifted her hand, then hesitated. I waited. Then she placed her palm against my chest. Not dramatic, not careful either. I don't want to keep being careful around you, she said. Every part of me went still. I looked down at her hand, then back at her. Then don't. She took one breath. Then she kissed me. It was quiet, simple. No big move, no rush. Just her stepping in and me meeting her there. Like we had both been standing on opposite sides of the same door for months and finally got tired of pretending it was locked. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead near my shoulder and laughed once under her breath. What? I asked. I can't believe you ignored me for 7 months. I was committed to making bad choices. You were very consistent. That's one of my better qualities, apparently. She smiled against my shirt, and I wrapped my arms around her slowly enough that she could change her mind. She did not. We stayed like that for a while in the middle of my apartment. The plans still spread across the table, the kettle cold on the stove, the whole building quiet around us. Later, we sat on the couch and talked until our voices got low and uneven from being tired. Not about everything. Not about forever. Just enough. She told me Garrett had texted again and she had not answered. I told her about the kitchen table where my old life ended. She took my hand while I said it, and she did not try to make it smaller. Sometime after 2, she fell asleep against my shoulder. I stayed still because moving felt rude. Her breathing evened out. The radiator clicked. A car passed below, tires hissing over wet pavement. I looked at her shoes by my door, her mug on my table, her hand resting loose against mine, and for the first time in a long time, my apartment did not feel quiet in the old way. Felt lived in. 18 months later, Laurel still technically has Unit 8. That is what she says when the building manager asks, or when delivery drivers get confused, or when someone from work comes by and sees her name still beside a separate mailbox. Technically, she has her own apartment, but her blue mug is in my cabinet. Her running shoes are by my door. Her jacket hangs on my hook most nights, and half my tea shelf belongs to her now. The wall between our units is still there, brick and plaster and old pipes, but it has become more of a legal detail than a real boundary. Sometimes, when we have people over, she tells the story before I can